lecture 3, we're going to go over both increases and decreases in supply and demand, and look at, again, how those changes occur in the market and the effect that those have on the equilibrium prices and quantities that we experience. Again, once you're finished with this module and you really understand those determinants of supply and demand, you'll be able to read the newspaper and think about, okay, how will this event impact the goods that I purchase, or the supply that might occur in terms of your labor, or the cost of your rent, or anything else that you might see occurring in your life. And so this is definitely very relevant material that's going to allow you to help you to understand how different events are going to change the supply and demand of products, and how that will impact prices that you experience in the market. All right, so first off, just a reminder of those determinants of demand, thinking about preferences. If we see the good becoming very popular, that's going to cause an increase in demand. If the good is no longer desired, if it's considered out of style, we will see a decrease in the demand. The number of buyers is also going to influence our demand curve, where we sit in terms of more buyers entering into the market, increasing demand, fewer buyers or people leaving the market, decreasing the demand. Thinking about the relationship between income and goods. So if we're thinking about a normal good, and as our income increases, we purchase more. As our income falls, we purchase less. These can be considered things like a new car, probably a luxury car would be even better example. iPhones and other smartphones would be considered normal goods. Hamburger meat, chicken, all considered normal goods, whereas when we move into inferior goods, we might see something like Spam as an inferior good, or a small car or a used car as an inferior good, or maybe the generic brand of shampoo or the generic brand of soda as an inferior good. An inferior good defined as income increases, our demand will decrease for that product as income decreases. So during a recession, if we lose our job, we actually buy more of that good. All right, and then we can talk about our substitutes in consumption. If the price of a substitute good falls, we're going to decrease the demand of that product. And then if the price of a substitute good increases, we increase the demand for that product. And so let's think about maybe Ford and Chevy vehicles. If the price of a Ford falls, that makes Fords look more attractive to buyers and they purchase fewer Chevys. But if Ford increases their prices, then we purchase more Chevys because now the Chevy looks more affordable. All right, the price of complementary goods also has an impact, and so let's stick with our car example. Purchasing a car, if the price of a car rises, we buy fewer tires. If the price of, or gas would be another complementary good to a car. If the price of cars falls, more people buy cars, and then more people are going to demand replacement tires. And so we can think about those in terms of those increases and decreases in price of our complementary goods. And then also, as consumers, we care about the future prices. If we expect gasoline to decrease this weekend, then we're going to wait till this weekend to purchase the product, and our demand will decrease today. But if we think that we're going to see an increase in the price of a product, we're going to increase our demand today so that we don't have to pay those higher prices later on. All right, supply, we also can look at our other things that aren't equal when we see a shift in our supply curve. What do sellers or producers care about? They care about how much it's going to cost to produce the product, the inputs that we bring in. So the cost of labor, the cost of land, the cost of our capital, any sort of input that goes into the production is going to affect the supply. And then along with that, more efficient technology is going to allow us to increase our supply at all price levels. We can also talk about the number of sellers as being very important. If sellers decrease, then that's going to decrease supply. If the number of sellers increases supply. Then we have those substitutes and complements in both production. So price of substitute in production rises. So if I can produce more, and let's go with, if I can produce dog calendars and charge a higher price, then I'm going to decrease the amount of cat calendars that I produce. And vice versa. If the price of those dog calendars falls, I'll supply more cat calendars. All right, and then also complements in production, and we looked at brewery, and the byproduct of producing beer is grain. As I have more grain available, I can produce more livestock, and the reverse is also true. And then the price is anticipated to rise in the future. If I think as a seller I'll be able to earn more in the future, I'm going to wait and try and supply my product later. If I expect prices to fall in the future, I'll increase my supply today to try and take advantage of those higher prices. All right, so now that we've quickly gone over those again, let's look at these all graphically again. So when our demand curve increases, so when demand increases, we say that demand increases at all price levels. And so it's not just at our high prices. So demand, quantity demanded used to be here, now it's gone up. Quantity demanded used to be here, now it's gone up. Quantity demanded down here at this price used to be here, and now it's gone up. And at all price levels, our demand has increased, and we see that our demand curve has shifted to the right. So when demand increases, we're talking about a shift in our demand curve to the right. As a result of that, we have a new equilibrium. And our new equilibrium is at the intersection of our existing supply curve and our new demand curve. Our old demand curve no longer exists. There isn't demand there. Our equilibrium price, we want to compare that equilibrium price to our old equilibrium price, and we can see that our price has gone up. Lost that line. Our price has gone up. So our new equilibrium, and I would call it P naught there, has gone up. And our equilibrium quantity, I'll call it Q naught, has also increased. And so when we have demand increasing, we're shifting that demand curve to the right, and our equilibrium price has gone up, and our equilibrium quantity has also gone up. Okay, and that's going to be the highlights of when we're thinking about an increase in demand. And we can talk about an increase in preferences, an increase in income if we have a normal good, a decrease in income if we have an inferior good, if we expect prices to increase in the future, if we see the complement good fall in price, if we see the substitute good increase in price, all of those causing us to increase our demand. The reverse, when we start to look at our demand decreasing. All right, so we can look at many different price levels and look at the quantity we initially demanded at each of these different price levels. So at high prices, at our equilibrium, and at low prices. And we know when demand decreases at all price levels, the quantity that we demand has gone down at all price levels. We can connect these points, and that was not very good at connecting, but what we see is demand has shifted to the left. So when demand decreases, we're talking about demand shifting left. That causes our equilibrium. We have a new equilibrium. We get rid of our old demand curve. Supply hasn't changed. It's only demand that's changed. And we see when we compare our equilibrium price, and I'm going to keep with the knot, our equilibrium price has gone down, and our equilibrium quantity has also decreased. So when we have a decrease in demand, demand curve shifts to the left, our price falls, and our quantity also falls. So decrease in demand can be caused by a decrease in income if we have a normal good, a decrease in the number of buyers, the product goes out of style, if we expect the price of the good to fall in the future, all of those things going into a demand decrease shifts to the left, price falls, quantity falls as a result as well. All right, now let's look at a supply chain. When the supply increases, and I know so many students want to say a supply increase is going to look like this because now the supply curve has shifted up. But that's not the case. A supply increase means that the quantity has increased, not the price. If you're going, a supply curve shifted up, that means that the price is going up. That's not what we want to happen. When supply increases, what we want to happen is that the quantity supplied is increasing at all prices, at low prices, at high prices, at equilibrium. All prices levels are increasing. We have this new supply curve that's to the right of our supply curve. And so we can look at our new equilibrium here. Our new equilibrium when supply is increased, or that supply curve shifted to the right, we have a new equilibrium price that is lower than our initial equilibrium and a new equilibrium quantity that is greater than our old equilibrium quantity. So a supply increase causes a price to fall and a quantity to increase. And so what might cause supply to increase? We might see a decrease in input costs, or we might see an increase in the number of sellers. We might expect these sellers to think that their price is going to fall in the future. And then we can also look at those complements and substitutes in production, all influencing where our supply curve increases, and technology as well. All right, thinking about the supply decreases. Again, I always hear students say, well, if I just go like this, not the right way. I always hear students say a supply decrease must mean that my supply curve is lower or it's below my old supply curve, and so that's a decrease. No, remember, a supply decreases the quantity. The quantity is what we want to decrease, not the price. And so we want to ignore that what looks like a lower or a fall in supply, and instead look at a movement in less quantity at each price level. If the prices are high, if the prices are low, if they're at the equilibrium, all prices, we see that supply curve and it's actually shifting left. I forgot my T. That supply curve shifts left. As a result, we have a new equilibrium. We forget about this supply curve. Our demand curve doesn't change. Our new equilibrium is at a higher price and at a lower quantity. So price has gone up and quantity has fallen because of that supply decrease. Okay, and what can cause a supply decrease? We could see the input costs of production going up. We might see a decrease in the number of sellers. We might see a decrease in the price of a complement good or an increase in a substitute in production good. We might think that our sellers expect a higher price in the future. Any of these items causing the supply to decrease. All right. When only price changes. So let's assume we're in the market for, and in our example in the last two lectures, we looked at oranges, but let's look at cars, just general cars, and let's say that the price of cars is falling. So price of cars is falling. How does this impact the market for cars? Well, if the price of cars falls, that's just saying that now instead of charging our equilibrium price, we're charging a price less than equilibrium, and let's call that P low. And if P low is happening, it's not that our supply curve is shifting or our demand curve shifted, it's just causing movement along the curve, right? Movement along the curves, and it's resulting in a new price in our market. Okay, and it could also be that, let's say we weren't at our equilibrium, let's say we were at our price high. We were at this price high, the price falls, and then all of a sudden we move into equilibrium, and that can happen as well. So it's not that necessarily that we see anything shifting. There's nothing shifting. It's just we're moving along these curves either toward or away from equilibrium. We're in general going to see us moving toward equilibrium, but it might be the case that we got things wrong, and we're moving in the wrong direction for a time being. All right, so that concludes our review graphically of supply and demand changes. Again, remember, the price of the product cannot shift the demand curve. It cannot shift the supply curve. It only adjusts the quantity demanded or the quantity supplied. It doesn't cause shifts. It just causes movements. It's those other things equal. Once they become not equal, that causes us to see a change in supply or a change in demand. So review those changes and don't get caught up and make the mistake of saying that a price change is going to shift a curve. All right, so with that, moving on to our next lectures, we're going to talk about when the governments intervene in the market.